In baseball, it's always been 3 strikes and you're out. On the night of August 20th, Ukraine decided to go one better than that. It launched a series of 4 devastating strikes, with the first 3 putting Russia out, while the 4th left it down for the count. Why? These weren't any old deep strikes. What Ukraine just pulled off was a very well-planned set of attacks that resulted in a night of strikes that obliterated Russia's nerve centers. We take you first to Rostov, which is one of the closest Russian oblasts to the Ukraine border and has served a vital role in enabling Russia to sustain its dreadful drone and missile assaults against Ukraine's cities throughout the war. Only it wasn't a drone manufacturing plant or an airfield that was in Ukraine's crosshairs on the night of August 20th, it was oil, and Ukraine struck big. Euromaidan Press provided the basic details in an August 21st article covering all 4 of the strikes we're going to discuss in this video. In Rostov, it says Ukraine sent its drones to hit the Novoshakhtinsk oil refinery, bypassing a pair of Pantsir and 1 Tor anti-air defense systems in the process. The presence of these defenses showcases just how much Russia values the refinery Ukraine just hit. Vladimir Putin can't afford to have any more of his refineries go offline, and we'll explain why in a moment. So he did everything he could to protect the refinery based in Rostov. It didn't work. In the Kyiv Independence report on the strike, it said that Ukraine's drones caused a fire to break out at the refinery, which lies about 6 miles away from the border between Russia and Ukraine and around 120 miles away from the Ukraine war's front lines. This was a deep strike, and it devastated the Novoshakhtinsk refinery with what residents say was an attack that caused at least 5 explosions in the facility's vicinity. The Kyiv Independent says that it hasn't been able to independently verify this first August 20th strike. Perhaps it doesn't need to. The footage that is already being shared on social media is already providing all of the evidence that anybody needs to confirm that the strike was successful. Shared to the Euromaidan Press X account, several videos show fires blazing at the Novoshakhtinsk facility. This is no small fire either. In all 3 of the videos that Euromaidan Press shared, we see flames lighting up the horizon and smoke billowing out into the night sky, suggesting Ukraine may have managed to hit an oil storage unit with its Rostov attack. If it has, that's going to cost Russia a lot more oil. And that brings us back to our earlier comment about Putin not being able to afford to lose more of that valuable substance. Ukraine has targeted Russia's oil refineries several times during the Ukraine war. These facilities are vital cogs in the Russian military machine, as it's refineries that are responsible for converting unusable crude oil into products that can actually serve a purpose, such as fuel, lubricants, and a host of other oil products that Russia's troops need on the front lines. The supply chain here is obvious. Russia drills for crude oil and sends what it finds to its refineries. Those refineries turn that crude oil into gasoline, diesel, or whatever else Russia needs and sends it on its way. Russian trains then transport the refined oil products to Ukraine, where they're typically used to fuel tanks and armored vehicles. Ukraine is trying to take out the middle link in that supply chain, and August has become a month of burning oil for Russia. Just a day before Ukraine carried out its Rostov strike, Euromaidan Press reported that Ukraine had engaged in a 3-week drone blitz that cut Russia's oil refining capacity by about 13.5%. About 44.3 million tons of Russia's annual refining capacity had already been affected by these 3 weeks of strikes. The Novoshakhtinsk strike adds another 5 million tons of capacity to that number, meaning Russia is probably closer to losing 15% of its refining capacity now. We published an in-depth report on just how impactful Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refining are, so check out the video to learn more. But the shortened story is that fewer oil products being made means Russia's soldiers in Ukraine become weaker. You can't drive a tank or an armored vehicle without fuel after all, so Russia's previously mechanized units are now being forced to attack Ukraine's defenses without armor. You can probably guess that's a bad idea, which is leading to more Russian casualties. Throw in a nice bonus of preventing Russia from selling refined oil products to other nations with these strikes, thus stopping Putin from raising more money to fund his war, and it's easy to see why Russia's oil has become a target. The Rostov strike is simply the latest in a series, and it shows us that the 3 weeks of hell Ukraine just put Russian oil through were just the beginning. That was strike 1. The Russians at BAT were already getting nervous about what August 20th still held in store for them. For strike 2, we head to a base of the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, better known as GRU, and the key Crimean port town of Sevastopol. Again, Euromaidan Press provides the basic details, stating that Ukraine's drones struck a facility referred to as the Black Sea Fleet's Military Unit No. 95408. The Exilenova Plus Telegram channel says that Russian GRU members are stationed at that facility, making it obvious why the base became a Ukrainian target. The Kyiv Post provides some more information. stating that Ukraine's daring raid saw it send between 10 and 15 unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, to storm the GRU compound, per local news reports. The same outlet says that air defense units were reported as firing in the vicinity of the strike, and at least 2 heavy ground explosions occurred. Russia, as is so often the case, tried to downplay the incident. Mikhail Razvazayev, who Russia has appointed to oversee occupied Crimea, would only confirm that some loud sounds were heard in the vicinity of the GRU base, and that the emergency responders were heading to the scene. He didn't say what had caused those loud sounds, however, he also didn't need to. Why? Because just as with Rostov, there's footage that shows us that Ukraine hits its mark again. This time shared by the Xelenova Plus Telegram channel, a series of 3 videos confirms that there was a large fire on the ground around, or more likely at, the GRU base. Those videos, which all appear to have been shot by Sevastopol residents, are similar to the footage shot of the Rostov oil refinery, in that they show a massive fire recorded from a distance. These aren't the types of fires that result from Ukrainian drones getting shot down by Russian air defenses. They're the sorts of fires that only happen when Ukraine hits a big target. Euromaidan Press adds that the NASA firm's satellite service, which tracks fires across the globe, has confirmed that there is a fire at the GRU base. Now, it's clear why Ukraine wants to hit Russian oil refining. We explained the reasons before, but why would it use some of its valuable long-range drones to take out a GRU headquarters? Part of the reason comes down to location. Sevastopol is in Crimea, which Russia has been occupying since its illegal annexation of the territory in 2014. Every time Ukraine hits a target in Crimea, it's sending a message to Putin that it refuses to accept this annexation will ever lead to Russia formally taking control of the Crimean Peninsula. Ukraine wants Crimea back, and it's going to use its drones to make that happen. The GRU base is just another on a long list of Crimean targets that Ukraine has taken out with its drones. But more specifically related to the GRU itself, Ukraine hits the base because Russia's GRU is a menace. Essentially a spy organization, GRU is responsible for causing havoc in both Ukraine and the wider European continent. The Security Distillery highlighted this in a September 2021 article, noting that the GRU operates one of the most dangerous hacking groups in the world. Often those groups turn their attention to Western enemies, as was the case with the SolarWinds hack that saw Russia break into several US government and business networks. But for Ukraine, a powerful hacking force can cause severe problems for the modern and often networked weapons it's using to defend itself against Russia. Add government systems and infrastructure into the mix, and the GRU's hackers are a threat that needs to be taken out. Ukraine didn't achieve that goal in Sevastopol, but it may have just taken out a commander or two who directed those hacking efforts. The strategist notes that the GRU is dangerous in more ways than just hacking. In November 2024, it wrote, "The head of MI5 warned in October that agents of Russia's military intelligence agency, the GRU, had conducted arson attacks, sabotage, and other dangerous actions with increasing recklessness. His MI6 counterpart said Russian intelligence services had gone a bit feral." These sorts of attacks aren't limited to Ukraine, the strategist points out. Arson attacks in Poland, Germany, the Czech Republic, and the Baltic states have all been linked to the GRU. So was the disruption to the French rail system during the first day of the Paris Olympics. This is an organization that uses subterfuge and dirty tactics to get what Putin wants. The claims that it's gone a bit feral are especially worrying, as a GRU that is untethered by whatever policies may have held it back in the past is a terrifying proposition. So Ukraine took care of the GRU problem, at least in Sevastopol. By now, the Russians at bat were sweating. That was 2 strikes in very quick succession. One more on August 20th would be a very bad night for Russia. Of course, Ukraine had another strike in the pipeline. We head next to the Yuzhny Air Base in the Kherson Peninsula, which the New Voice of Ukraine reports was subjected to another Ukrainian drone assault that caused fires. It quotes the Crimean Wind Monitoring Group, which took to Telegram to report the strike. At around 3:35 a.m., there were 2 powerful explosions in the area of the Yuzhny airfield on the Kherson Peninsula. Several fires broke out at this location afterward, the group claimed. This time around, we don't know much more than that about the attack. There's very little information floating around about what assets Russia maintains at the airbase that Ukraine struck on August 20th, though we can probably make some accurate assumptions. Russian bombers are almost certainly at the base. Russia has been using these aircraft to launch missiles and glide bombs at Ukraine, so it stands to reason that Ukraine wants to take them out. Airbases are so often home to helicopters, which represent another aerial threat that Ukraine wants to destroy and will often contain stockpiles of ammunition for their aerial assets. Hitting any of these targets would make the Kherson strike a good one for Ukraine, but we don't know what Ukraine hit, only that there were some loud bangs and yet another fire. We do, however, have a Russian denial that anything untoward is happening at all, as the Crimean Wind Telegram channel explains. Russian Governor Mikhail Razvazayev wrote at 0501, the text took a long time to agree on, The loud sounds that were heard in the area of the Voronezh-Stroiteli Street on the territory of the military unit with the Black Sea Fleet, together with emergency response services, Emercom, police, ambulance and the Sevastopol Rescue Service, conducting exercises to practice extinguishing fires and eliminating emergency situations in conditions close to combat. For obvious reasons, such exercises are not warned in advance. We could almost buy the excuse that loud bangs could be caused by some sort of military exercises involving the Black Sea Fleet. Almost. But those drills were supposedly being carried out during the early hours of the morning, which makes absolutely no sense unless you come to the obvious conclusion Razvazayev was lying. And that lie was revealed almost as soon as it spilled out of the Russian governor's mouth, as Crimean Wind says that NASA's firm's satellites have already picked up evidence of powerful fires at the Yuzhny Air Base. What sort of drills were you carrying out that required you to set an airbase on fire, Mr. Razvazayev? Don't answer. We already know that you can't come up with any plausible explanation. That's the third strike, and the Russian batter turns to walk away. But Ukraine isn't done yet. It may have struck Russia out, but it has a beanball loaded up and ready to land a knockout blow. And to wrap up a series of devastating attacks that took out Russia's nerve center, that beanball was thrown right at Russia's head, or more accurately, the Voronezh Oblast. We go back to Euromaidan Press to get the details. It says that Ukraine managed to strike a railway power substation in the Voronezh Oblast. And again, Russia can't say that it didn't happen, as the NASA firm's satellites have already picked up on the fire, and Excelenova Plus has a picture showcasing the damage that had been done. Rather than act as though nothing had happened, as it did in Khersones, Russia at least admitted that Ukraine sent drones to the Voronezh power substation. Of course, Russia stopped short of confirming that those drones scored a direct hit, as we can see from the Voronezh regional governor Alexander Gusev's statement. Shared to Telegram by Astra, the statement reads, "Air Defense forces on duty in one of the districts in the south of the region have already detected and destroyed more than 5 UAVs. According to preliminary information, there are no casualties. As a result of the UAV's crashes, an energy facility was damaged. Several villages remain without electricity, and a number of passenger trains have been delayed." At least Gusev didn't blame drone debris this time around. Euromaidan Press adds that the delays Gusev mentions affected 19 trains, and that the Voronezh regional governor is warning of potential future attacks. The obvious question here is why target a railway power substation? The answer is that rail plays a huge part in Russian logistics. If you remember the oil supply chain we touched on earlier in the video, you might recall that sending refined oil to troops on the front lines was the third step of that chain. It's rail in particular because that's the transportation method Russia relies upon more than any other. The Royal United Services Institute highlights this in a small profile of Russia's railways where it says, "More so than any other military, Russia's ground forces rely on its expansive railway network to move troops and material across the country for training exercises in peacetime and to mobilize and sustain troops in war theaters. More so than any country." That translates to Russia can't send anything anywhere if it doesn't have access to railways, which adds some much-needed context to the Voronezh strike. Take out a power station and you take a railway offline, even if only temporarily. Every delay like this stops fuel, equipment, and even reinforcements from reaching the front lines, which is only good news for Ukraine's defenders. Ukraine has figured this out too, and it's working on ways to take out even the most armored of Russia's trains. We covered this topic in a recent video, so check it out to learn more about Russia's dependence on the mighty rail. All of this adds up to 4 strikes, 1 night, and a whole lot of damage caused to key Russian infrastructure that supports Putin's invasion of Ukraine. But perhaps as important is that August 20th is just the latest example of how Ukraine is focusing ever more intently on deep strikes that attack Russia's rear, with the goal of weakening its forces on the front. In August alone, and bearing in mind that the month isn't done yet, Ukraine has launched 27 verified drone attacks on targets inside Russia or Russian-occupied territory, the BBC reported on August 15th. A week has passed since those numbers were shared, and we can add at least 4 more strikes to that number thanks to August 20th. However, the point being made is that these types of strikes are part of a very clear strategy that Ukraine is following to a T. Council on Foreign Relations senior fellow Charles Kupchan explains the 2 objectives this deep strike campaign has. One is to hit targets such as oil depots and military installation that can impair Russia's war effort and decrease the revenue flowing into Russia's war economy, he says. The second objective is to bring the war to Russia's people, as each successful Ukrainian strike, and even those that result in Ukraine's drones being blasted out of the skies, serves as a constant reminder to the average Russian that their president has forced their country into a war that does them no good. Overall, Ukraine's strategy is to increase the costs of the war to Russia, hoping that rising costs help convince Putin to stop his aggression and agree to a durable ceasefire, Kupchan adds. There is certainly plenty of damage being done. While it's too early to say what the 4 August 20th strikes cost Russia in monetary terms, we do know that Russia lost billions of dollars to Ukraine's deep strikes during the first half of 2025. Specifically, $9.5 billion in indirect damage resulting from the disruption these kinds of strikes cause, adding to $1.3 billion of direct damage. That's according to figures shared by the Ukrainian Army's Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrskyi and reported by the Kyiv Independent. There's also the impact on Russia's troops to consider. Think about what Ukraine just attacked on the night of August 20th. An oil refinery left in flames translates to less fuel being sent to Russia's soldiers on the front lines. Taking out a GRU headquarters strikes a blow against Russia's hacking and sabotage operations, meaning Russia can't weaken Ukraine's forces from behind the front lines. An airbase being struck could lead to fewer missiles and glide bombs flying into Ukraine to support Russia's ground assaults, and a rail line being shut down due to a power substation strike creates logistical delays that may be enough to prevent a Russian assault or force it to happen without the necessary equipment. This is all about weakening the Russian war machine. And if Ukraine keeps up the same kind of pace we saw on August 20th with its deep strikes, it won't be long until Russia is out of the game. There's plenty more bad news for Russia. Before Ukraine embarked on its 4-hit combination of strikes on August 20th, it had Russian missiles in its sights. Russia's missile strike power just collapsed. And it's all thanks to a combination of deep strikes, Western sanctions, and a daring drone operation that took out a third of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest damaging deep strikes Ukraine pulls off. And thank you as always for watching.